Hello, ladies. Welcome tonight. I am 1 minute late. I had to drop my son off at driver's ed. He has driving tonight, so I was pushing it for time. But I got my Dunkin' Donuts, and I'm ready to go now. So hopefully my daughter will be okay. Abby's here with her. She's been a little fussy today, so we'll see how it goes. But might have to cut it short if she starts screaming in the background. Got to get my notes. I got my notes over here. Okay, so I wanted to talk about a subject. Can you all hear me? You can all hear me. I'm just making sure all the settings are right. I'm assuming since no one said anything. Hello, everyone. We got ladies in the chat. So I'm assuming everything is ready to go. I haven't done it at the church for a long time. Well, since the Wirecast. So, okay, good. Finally, someone answered. You can hear me. All right, good. So I'm going to turn to some of the verses that I had real quick because I wanted to start out with some verses because, as most of you know, Proverbs is just packed full of verses about training up a child and the way he should go. When he's old, he will not depart from it. Verses about foolish children bringing their mother to shame, verses like that. So I wanted to read some of them. So let me turn to them real quick. Not turn to them, but type them in on my phone. I wrote them all down. So, okay, so we got Proverbs 22, verse 6, which I just said, basically, train up a child on the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Okay, so that's obviously super straightforward and right to the point. And then John 1, verse 4. I really like this verse. And it's just simply, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. And I really believe as a parent, I know one of my goals in life is to raise good children. And it's to have children that walk in truth even after they're out of my house. That's my main number one goal. I want them to walk in truth, and I will be happy if every single one of my children walk down the aisle pure, they marry a good person, and they stay in church for the rest of their life, and they win souls to Christ. I will be super happy if that's what my children do. If they're never famous, if they never accomplish anything more in life than that, that is my prayer for them. So Proverbs 29, verse 15. Okay, so there's also a lot of verses about the rod and spanking. Obviously you knew I was going to cover that. And I know it's not popular in today's world. And I know it's not popular even being on YouTube and saying this, but spanking is still biblical no matter what the world says. So Proverbs 29, verse 15, the rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. And this reminds me a lot of why you have to be the one training up your children. If you leave them to themselves, if you let the TV raise them, if you let daycare raise them, if you let teachers in a school raise them, they're going to bring you shame one of these days. So that is a good verse for always having your children with you. Sorry about my voice. I can't win, and I'm pulling out of sickness. I've had a really bad cold. I had the flu a couple weeks ago, and now I have a really bad cold. So sorry about my voice. It's kind of raspy. Proverbs 13. I was hoping the hot drink would help it. Hasn't yet. 13:24 says, he that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that love him chasteneth him betimes. And this is one of those verses that people have a really hard time with, especially parents that don't spank their children. I don't hate my son, I don't hate my child, but the Bible says if you spare your rod, you hate. Not even if you don't ever spank them, if you spare it. If you spareth, he that spareth his rod hateth his son. Spareth means that you're stingy with it. So if you are never spanking your child, you hate your son because, like I said, the number one goal is to raise children that love the Lord, but also it's to teach them that sin has consequences. And that sin, it's a little lie one day when they're little, but if they keep that up and they get more and more proficient in lying, it's going to carry into all areas of their life, including their job. With lying comes stealing. What if they embezzle money someday? That's going to end up in prison. So you hate your son if you're not spanking him or disciplining him. Proverbs 22, verse 15 says, Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Okay, so lots and lots of verses about the rod. So obviously, you know, I am for spanking. But I wanted to talk today about training and disciplining, especially starting off. I'm going to talk a lot about toddlers just because I feel like, you know, women in the new IFB movement, they're really, really trying to do things right. A lot of them have been saved later in life. And maybe some of them, maybe some of you guys weren't raised in a Christian home. Okay. So maybe you weren't disciplined the biblical way. And so you are coming into this as a new parent, as a new Christian, and you're just like, where do I begin? Where do I start? And I feel like a lot of new IFB people take it to an extreme. And they, you know, they hear the preaching about disciplining and spanking from the pulpit, and they overcompensate. Okay, because they've never been taught how to discipline. You know, I grew up being spanked. I grew up in a home that enforced corporal punishment, and so did my husband. So we kind of, we're just used to it. It's just like second nature. We know, you know, what you don't, you know, the lines you don't cross when it comes to it, because you can cross a line when it comes to physical corporal punishment. And I really wanted to do this to just kind of reinstate or reinforce and encourage you to find a balance in your life when it comes to your children, because there are situations where it can be an abusive situation that I never want that to happen to any child at all. So the flip-flop in a Hispanic home, we don't have a rod. We have I don't even know how to say that. The flip-flop. That's hilarious. I've seen videos. Oh, that's funny. If you're being smacked with a flip-flop, I doubt that's going to leave lasting scars. So I've never hit my kids with a flip-flop, but that's interesting. So what was I going to say? Oh, yes. If you just do me a favor right now, and if you have any of the Pearl's books, Michael and Debbie Pearl, about child training, go get them. And one, either throw them in the trash, or two, just burn them. Because I really feel like they actually have contributed to some homes being abusive. But I feel like in their books, it's all the rod, and it's trying to train their children to be little robots versus love and grace and empathy for the child. Okay, because there are going to be, God shows us grace each and every day, and there's going to be times when you need to extend that same grace to your children. Okay, so, and I don't like their books at all. I do not like them. My husband has always said Michael Pearl is a weirdo, and he does not like him. I do not condone any of their books. There might be little nuggets of truth in them, but you have to wade through a lot of other junk to get to that. So it's not worth it, especially for newer parents starting out. Just stick with the Bible. Just go by what the Bible says. Go, you know, listen to advice of older women that have older children and have been through it. Listen to advice of women older than I that have raised children into adulthood as functioning adults, and it's worked. Listen to them. Get their advice. So spanking is biblical, no matter what society says. And so a lot of parents are like, okay, well, when should I start? When should I start with spanking? Well, I do not spank babies, please. I have heard horror stories. I've even heard like preaching from people growing up that someone just said, I want to know, Ashley Lavelle asked, I want to know what age do you stop spanking? I'll get into that too. She said, I have heard old IFB pastors say till they married. There are some that believe that. I'll get to that. It's in my teenage part, but I believe a little differently when it comes to that. And, you know, I want to say too, a lot of this stuff is based off my experience growing up in a home that enforced corporal punishment, and just seeing other homes that enforce it. This is my opinion. A lot of it is, obviously I believe in spanking. It's in the Bible, but a lot of, you know, there's a lot of areas that you kind of have to decide for your home and your family. And a lot of this is based off of my experience and my opinion because of my life experiences. And everyone's going to be different. So this is where you and your husband are going to have to sit down. You're going to have to discuss this, and you're going to have to put down the rules on what you want in your home. So, no, do not I've heard old IFB preachers tell stories about how they brought their baby home from the hospital and they were spanking them like a week later. That's child abuse. That's awful. Don't ever do that. Babies do not know. They are not crying because they are defying you. Babies are crying because that is their only way to communicate with you. Anytime Kelly cries, she's not crying because I'm going to show mom and I'm going to be, I'm going to disobey her by crying. No, she's crying because she has a bellyache. She's crying because she was just in a very warm cocoon for 9 months and was pushed out into this cold world, cold Illinois winter. That's why she's crying. She's not crying out of defiance. So please do not ever spank a baby. Do not ever swat a baby. That's child abuse. They will not know what's going on. They will scream their little hearts out. Kelly especially, she is very, very sensitive. She's very sensory. Everything like sets her off. My daughter, I was nursing her here in the nursery before church one day, and Lana came in the nursery and slammed the door, and she jumped. Her whole body jumped, and she started crying, and I literally could not calm her down for a half hour. She just screamed and screamed and screamed because it scared her so badly. I can't imagine swatting her. That's awful. It makes me sick. Do not spank a baby. You start swatting a baby. And when I say spank a 1 or 2 year old, I'm saying that very loosely because a little pop on the leg is basically all they need, or a little, if they're touching for something hot or touching for an electrical outlet and you're trying to train them, no, a little slap on the hand. So when they are old enough to know the difference between yes and no, okay, they know when you're saying what yes means, they know what no means. And you're telling them a command and they are looking at you and they're willfully disobeying you. That's when they need a pop on the leg. So I would say 1.5 is about when that starts, 1.5 to 2. It's about when that starts. And like I said, discipline should be with the intention to raise good adults, okay? Teach them that sin and disobedience has consequences. That's why you train your baby when they're reaching for that outlet. You train them the meaning of no. You're trying to keep them safe. So when they disobey you, then you pop them on the leg or pop them on the hand or whatever. Excuse me. But, they're spanking is not to raise robots or to break the child's spirit completely. And that's why I don't like the To Train Up a Child books, because I think that the goal of them is to break the child down completely. And honestly, I love spirited children. I am a spirited person. I have a spirited personality. I'm very stubborn and strong-willed by nature. And honestly, that sometimes it's good in a child, especially in the day and age we live in, if you channel it right. Okay. I was raised in a good home, so it works to my advantage because I am very strong in what I believe and I'm steadfast and I'm not going to change because I'm very strong-willed by nature. So if you have a strong-willed child, thank the Lord for that. Because if you train him, you keep him in church and you train him and you teach him the Bible and you teach him the ways of the Lord, when he grows up, that strong will is going to work to his advantage. So I don't spank with the intention to break down the child completely. You have to just learn to channel their strong will. So that's where the loving correction comes in. So the hand slap, I do slap my children's hands sometimes when it comes to like them reaching for things. I try to hit the leg most of the time, just the top part of their thigh. Do not hit them over a diaper. It's not going to do any good. You're going to hurt their little bodies. That diaper is so thick and padded, especially when you use cloth diapers. Don't hit them over the diaper. Just, lightly slap the top part of their leg where the chunky thigh, right there where that's at. So a light pop or a short session is sufficient. If you are using an item, and I don't even really start using items until they're like 2, they're a little bit older. A paint stick, that's something really light, real light and thin. That's what I use. Or like a real thin spoon, but not like a super thick, heavy item. You do not want to be leaving bruises all over your child. That's awful. And if you're leaving bruises, it means that you're like beating them, literally. You're sitting there and hitting them over and over and over again. And don't do that, especially with a 2-year-old. A 2-year-old, a comb. I've never tried a comb. Dorothy said a comb works. So And Kelly Logan said, you cannot spoil a newborn. Pick up your babies and hold them, wrap them, rock them. I agree. You cannot. Babies, I was actually, if you look up on YouTube, there was a study that they did, I believe in the 50s. And I don't know if these were children that were in orphanages or what, but they did these experiments with 60 or 70 children, and they withheld the mother's love from them. So basically, these children were fed, they were given food, and they were changed, but they were just laid in a bed 24 hours a day. And it was so sad to me. I cannot believe they got away with doing this to children, because out of that experiment, I believe, I'm probably getting the numbers wrong, but I believe 30% of those children died. They ended up dying. And then the other percent of the children, they had developmental problems in their brain, because children need their mother's touch. They need love. And that first year is so important for that. So, just hold that baby all the time. Wear your baby. Go sleep with your baby if you want. This is my first, I'm loving sleeping with Kelly. It's so cute just having her cuddled up into me all night. Oh my goodness. So she loves it too. It's so sweet. It's the sweetest thing in the world, having those little baby size next to you. Someone said, I had a pastor tell me to spank until they submit. Have you ever heard of that? Yes, I've heard of that. Most children, I've found with my children, I've had some strong-willed children, and it did not take more than a couple spankings to get them to stop. Chloe is probably one of my strongest-willed children, and now she's just a sweetheart. But even then, like when her dad would discipline her over something, it didn't take much. I mean, it took a couple spankings, but I've never, these spanking marathon things that people brag about, I'll get into bragging about your training sessions later, but I think they're unnecessary. Most children want to please you. Most children want to make you happy. And especially if you've been pouring your love into them and really loving on them and building them up, and they are sad to see you, hurt or disappointed. And it's not going to take that much to, get them to obey you. So yeah, make sure that when they're that young, especially, you really cuddle and love them afterwards. After you used to spank them, just calm them down and tell them, I love you so much, but I have to do this. I have to protect you. What if, when they're real little, obviously the whole speech thing's not going to work, but as they're growing up, I have to train you to obey mommy, because you could be in a situation sometime where you have to listen to mommy. So you have to listen to mommy all the time. Sometimes you'll have many sessions throughout the entire day broken up. Sometimes you'll feel like all you do is discipline all day long. And I especially felt that way when I had 3 that were 3 and under. Oh my goodness. I'm like, is this ever going to end? And all you moms that have little kids, you know what I mean. You feel like you walk around with a spoon in your back pocket the whole entire day. And you're constantly whipping that thing out. But like I said, try not to make them long sessions in and of themselves, but you're going to have sessions throughout the day, if you know what I mean. So, obviously the number one thing that you need to do is you need to be consistent. Okay. If you have a rule, this thing is off limits, be consistent with it. Don't be sitting there watching them get into whatever thing it is and be like, oh, well, I'm just too tired to get up. I know, like I said, sometimes it feels like you're going to be spanking all the time. You're like, I'm too exhausted to get up. You have to be consistent with it so that they learn. And every house is going to have, different rules and different guidelines. You're going to have different things. I'll get into some of the offenses for the McMurtry home rules. I'll get into some of the offenses that we have, but it could be different in your home. Okay. Every home has different rules and different guidelines and things. I have not heard of raising godly tomatoes, but I think I've heard Leslie talking about it. Or is that where they talk about staking? She's talked about it in child training things before, where the staking the tomatoes is basically, if you have a child that's acting out, you just stay with that child all day long. So basically you're just keeping an eye on that child 24/7, which that sounds like a good plan. I've never read that book, but I don't know. I don't know if there's anything wrong with it. I should get it and read it before I say anything. So Jessica said, I also try it out on my inner lower arm so I know how hard to hit, so I don't hit too hard. That's a good idea. You want it to sting, but you don't want it to leave bruises. Okay, if you're leaving bruises, you're hitting too hard because it's hitting the lower tissues. I mean, obviously sometimes an accidental one, but if you're consistently leaving bruises all over your child, that's not good. Don't do that. So set the rules and stick with them. Nicole Shepard said, what if your husband doesn't want you to discipline while he's home and it creates inconsistencies? That's really tough. But you just do the best that you can when he's not home. You are going to be with him the majority. I know for me, my husband is literally only home for like a couple hours in the evening before he goes to bed. And like some days he's only home an hour, maybe before he goes to bed. So for the majority of the time, I'm with my children. I'm the one that's doing I do 90% of the discipline, probably 90% of the discipline. And then my husband deals with the hard things, the hard things that come up. Or, you know, if we're together on vacation or something for a week, we'll kind of split it up. But for the most part, you just have to discipline them while they're home. And then, I don't know, it's not going to be as ideal as dad backing you up, but they're still going to profit a lot from your correction and your discipline. There's not much you can do if your husband's not going to help out. I mean, there's not much you're going to do. You can go over his head or yell at him in front of the children, and that's not going to help matters. So that's just one of those things. Also, don't have too high of expectations, okay? A 2-year-old is going to throw temper tantrums. They're learning the rules. They're learning boundaries. They're new to this whole thing. They're only 2. They've only been alive 2 years. So just be consistent with them. Be loving, but be firm. Don't freak out on them. Don't scream your head off at them. And another thing when it comes to, the younger children this age, don't feel like you have to prove something to other people. I think I learned a lot from this, learned from my mistakes. When I had 3 children, 3 and under, it was tough. I was a basket case a lot of times. And I felt like, I think too, moms that have a lot of children, we feel like we have to prove something, like I'm Wonder Mom or I'm Super Mom, Wonder Woman, Wonder Mom. I'm Super Mom. Look at me. I have the most well-behaved children in the world. We feel like we have to prove something. And we have too high of expectations. Kids are going to get tired and kids are going to cry and kids are going to whine, and we all have a human nature. Like I said, the goal is not perfect little robots that don't feel pain, don't react to pain, don't react to being tired, don't react to outside, situations. Obviously, you want to teach your children to have self-control, but the goal is not little robots. The goal is to raise functioning adults. And when parents go overboard and they don't care about their children's emotional needs or whatever, they're raising better adults already right out of the gate. And I've seen it in many, many, many Christian homes. A lot of Christian families that I've seen that have gone overboard when it comes to disciplining. As soon as their children are old enough to walk out of the house, they walk out, they will leave church. And I'm not saying this is the case of everyone that leaves home. Okay. So if you have a child that's left home and you did the best you could, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just speaking from experience when it comes to, and I'm talking about parents that were like screaming at the top of their lungs at their children, like grabbing them by the hands and spanking them as they swing through the air. Yes, my husband actually saw people that did that at church in front of everyone. Craziness. Don't be that parent, because you're going to raise bitter children when you're like that, when you're just over the top with the spankings and the discipline. So give lots of love at this age. A 2-year-old, I hear so many complaints about a 2-year-old, but they are so cute. I know they're ornery, and I know they have temper tantrums, but the things they say are so cute at this age. You're never going to have that age again. And just give them lots of love. Tell them, Mommy loves you. Mommy loves you so much. You're such a good boy. Positive reinforcements for every time that they do things that are good, really, really do the positive reinforcement too. Even if you're so tired, your eyes are closing. Try to cuddle them, try to love them. So then, yes, they do create bitter and fearful children, and the fear can carry with them for their whole lives. It really can. And a lot of adults have problems directly related to their first formative years in their life. And I'm not excusing them, because you know what? Ultimately, it's your choice. You got to get over it. I've been through some stuff in my life too, and you just got to get over it. You got to choose that you're going to have victory over that area in your life, and you're not going to become bitter about it, because bitterness only affects the person that only affects you, not the person that you're mad at. So just get over it. I'm not excusing them, but a lot of adults will bring baggage into their marriage life based off of, situations that they were raised in. So, okay. So when you get to, let me see what some of the comments are. You guys are commenting a lot, so I'm trying to keep up with the comments as I'm talking. But Amber says, I've always heard the terrible two thing, but I haven't had one child have them yet. I've had a couple stubborn children. I'm going to admit it. I've had a couple really stubborn children. My eldest, from the time he was 2 months old, he was holding his breath because he was mad and passing out. And that carried up until he was, oh my goodness, like 3 or 4 or 5? I don't know. He would pass out. And back then we put him in the nursery. And the nursery workers would get so worried when he would pass out, obviously. And I was like, no, it's fine. When he starts screaming and you see he's going to pass out, lay him on the floor. He'll pass out, and then he'll wake up and he'll be fine. And so all the nursery workers just knew when Tommy started holding his breath, lay him on the floor, he'd wake up and he was fine. So, and then Tommy and Chloe were probably my two most stubborn. But now they're super great kids. So, it pays off in the end. It pays off eventually. Okay. And I found with Lana, she's a stinker too. Partly my fault because she was the baby for so long. But when she really pushes my buttons, I can usually get onto her one time and she straightens up. She's fine after that. So sometimes that's all they need. They just need to be reminded, hey, mom's still in charge. And you are going to get punished if you continue on this way. So in middle school, obviously the spanking should be way less. You should be spanking a middle schooler way less than a toddler. Toddlers, you just need little pops throughout the day because they're going to be doing a lot of stuff. Like I said, they're learning. The offenses that are big in our home, okay, these are like the list of McMurtry offenses. From the time they're little, a big no-no is crying in public. We do not like them crying in public. Basically throwing fits in public, screaming in public. That's a big no-no. From the time they're little, we train them. I have actually been walking in the store with my children, and one of them starts crying, and I have a cart and everything, and I put the cart back, I turn around and walk back out to the van. And then I deal with that child. I've been in restaurants, but I've had to take a crying child out and deal with them because that's very important to us. We don't like it when our children cry in public and scream and throw fits. It's a big no-no. So we've established boundaries from the beginning. And when we were younger, and we had younger kids, we had a code word, because you can't be too careful nowadays. And I'm putting this on YouTube for everyone to see. But, and we would tell the kids if they were screaming or crying in public, you're going to get some medicine when we get home. Medicine, every parent gives their children medicine, right? Dopes them up nowadays. So, and it would be funny because they'd be crying and be like, I don't want medicine. I don't want medicine. But they knew medicine meant a spanking. So that was like our code word. And then hitting siblings, I don't like that. It's automatic spanking. You hit your sibling, you're getting a spanking. If someone's like, oh, you're hitting your child for hitting another child, isn't that an oxymoron? No, because the Bible tells you to spank. So I'm doing what the Bible says, first of all. And, but the Bible also tells us to turn the other cheek, teaches forgiveness and things like that. So I'm teaching the children that this is the rule and this is the punishment for the rule. Okay. So, and I'm not spanking them just out of anger all to the top, calmly. You calmly spank your children for that. Direct disobedience. If you tell a child to do something and they ignore you, or, they could legitimately not hear you. I have a smallish house, but we have a basement, and it's kind of hard to hear sometimes when you're, yelling down the stairs or whatever. So they could legitimately not hear you. But if you directly tell them to do something and they ignore you, if you say do this and they do the opposite, direct disobedience. And then also another big one in our home, that's a big no-no, is lying. I hate lying. I haven't had too many children that are liars, which is good. But we train them from the time they're young. You need to tell me the truth, because if I find out, you're getting double the punishment. Because in our home, we have 7 children now. Obviously, Kelly doesn't really keep an eye on her siblings, but there are eyes everywhere, all over the house. So if someone lies, one of the siblings is going to rat them out. And believe me, one of my kids would rat the other kid out. There's not much loyalty when it comes to not getting in trouble. So they will get ratted out. So we've established that from the time they're young. You tell me the truth, and the punishment will go a lot lighter than if you lie to me. If you lie to me, it's going to be way worse. I can't stand liars. I can't stand them. I can't stand them as adults. I can't stand them. I couldn't stand them growing up. And I do not want my children to be liars. I want them to be truthful, even if it means that they are going to get punished. And we've really tried instilling that in our kids. So that is just a few things. Go ahead and tell me. See, and I want to see some of your comments too, because I know some of you have different house rules than me. What's important to you guys? What's important to you, and what's like a big no-no in your house? I want to hear what they are. Jen asked, what about when brothers are playfully wrestling, then one gets hurt and it turns into real fighting? Do you spank both since they are both real fighting? Yeah, that one's tough, because wrestling really can turn into some tears. Now, I have told my boys this before when they were younger. They don't wrestle now, obviously. When they were younger, I've told them, if you wrestle, this will end in tears. And if this ends in tears, you're in trouble. And if it ends in tears, they're in trouble. So that's how that goes. I do warn them, because, it's inevitable. I feel like someone always gets hurt. When they're roughhousing, someone always gets hurt. So, and they're boys, they're going to wrestle. So just maybe tell them that. It's just say, if you guys start fighting, you're getting spanked. Simple as that. So Angelique said, I wish more parents cracked down on lying, because now, even as an adult with Christian men, I have encountered a lot of liars. I know. I can't stand it. There's so many liars. There's so many adults that are liars. I encounter it all the time. There's people that will bold-faced lie to your face. Bold-faced lie to your face. I make you using some funny terms tonight. Christian men who are liars. That's terrible. It is. I know. I hate it. I hate it. That's why I don't like anonymous accounts. You guys know how I feel about anonymous accounts, because I feel like that's almost kind of a lie in a way, because you're not, well, the main thing is you're not backing up your words with your name, and your name should be very important to you. My name is very important to me, because it is who I am. It's my testimony. It's my reputation. So it makes me be more careful what I say, having my name backing up my words. So hit a parent, automatic spanking. Oh yeah. That's a no-brainer in my house too. I don't know if that's ever happened. Maybe when they were like 1, maybe when they were 1, that's happened. But as they're older, no way. That's never even been an issue. So the number one thing, like I said, we use keywords in public, and also don't grandstand your training. Okay. So what do I mean by grandstanding? I mean, don't make a big show of it. Okay. Don't make sure that people see that you're disciplining your child, if that makes sense. One of my very, very good friends, Gina, yes, I'm going to talk about you. She just moved to Pastor Perry's church, which I'm still a little bitter about. Trying not to let bitterness overtake my life, but it's a little hard. I remember I was so impressed. I'm going to brag on her a little bit, because we were at church. They would stay the whole afternoon because they drove 2 hours to come to our church. And one time her son was acting up or something, or throwing a fit. And the next thing I know, or he's throwing a fit, it's kind of in the background, I'm not really paying attention. The next thing I know, like 10 minutes later, he's all calmed down, and she had already dealt with it. And I hadn't even noticed. No one even noticed. She just took him and she went in the back room where the nursery is, and she closed the door and she dealt with him. She was very quiet about it. She did it, and that impressed me, because that's the type of training I like. I like it when you are trying to get away with no one seeing you doing it, because it just shows that you're not doing it for show. You're doing it because you're really dealing with something. And so I've always tried to do that, especially around grandparents, or maybe parents that aren't saved, family members that aren't saved. They don't like spanking as it is. And so if you are making a big show of disciplining your child in front of them, they're going to have a hard time with it, because they're already not used to the spanking thing, and they're not going to like it, and they're not going to understand. So what I do is I very quietly just take the child by the hand. I say, come with me. You go into a different room, you spank them, and you're done. And then most of the time, that's about all it takes to get my child to straighten up. Most of the training, oh man, I'm having a hard time with my throat. Most of the training should be done at home, in the privacy of your own home. I've noticed that parents that make a big deal out of disciplining their children in public are usually letting it slide at home. And the reason that they're grandstanding in public is because they want to look like they're the best parents in the world. And see, I stay on top of it. I don't let them get away with anything. I am on top of the situation. But most of the time, if you're training well at home, you can eliminate a lot of the public training episodes. Like I said, I've had to take my kid out that's crying in a store. I've had to take my kid out that was crying in a restaurant. I've had to spank my kid at church. But I try not to make a show of it. I try to do it quietly. So that's another thing. Be careful about grandstanding. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You are the one ultimately who has to deal with your out of control children if you're not doing it. That's just the truth of it. You're the one that lives with them, no one else. So you're the one that's going to have to deal with their out of control behavior if you're not disciplining. So, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. But yeah, don't stress if you are somewhere and you have to let it slide once or twice. I said be consistent, but that's mainly in the home. If you are out in public and you have to let it slide, when they're older, you can tell them, that's one. I've done that all the time. That's one. And they know what I mean. They know what I mean. So, and so now we get to, let me see what some of the comments are saying. So Megan said, if one of the boys get hurt during a wrestle, she'd separate the two. I've done that before. I separate my kids all the time. I'd be like, you go outside and play. You go in your room and read a book. You do this. I separate my kids a lot. If they ignore you and keep fighting, give a spanking. And then Jen said, I think sometimes our expectations change the more kids we have compared to when we only maybe had two. They do. And you learn more. I mean, the more kids you get, the more you learn. The more you, I feel like the older I get, the more of a gentle parent that I am. I have a temper, and kids will bring out the worst in you when it comes to your temper. But the thing is, with kids, you got to realize kids have a soul, and they have a heart, and they have emotions. And, when you fly off the handle at them, they have a hard time forgetting that. And so you really have to, it really makes you work on the person that you are. And I mean, most of us we have human nature and we're rotten. And I feel like children just magnify our faults. I don't know if you guys feel that way, but I do. I feel like my children have magnified all the weak areas of my life. And, when I was a teenager and growing up and newly married before kids, I felt like I was on top of the world and I'm just so super close to Jesus. And I'm a great Christian. But then you have children and you're running low on sleep and you're so tired and you're so worn out from just cleaning and disciplining that all of your weaknesses in your nature come to the surface and you really see what you're made of. And so I feel like having children is a very humbling experience for me. It shows me areas that I need to work on all the time. And some days I am like the most patient, loving mother, and there's clouds and butterflies and roses. And then other days I am just a blah mom. I yell at the kids and I'm stressed out and I'm tired and I'm worn out and I just want to lay in my bed and pull the covers over my head. So I'm not the world's most perfect mom, okay? And none of us are, because we will always deal with the sinful nature until we get to heaven. But I do feel like children really show you your true nature, and they magnify your faults. And that's, maybe God wants that in our lives to help hone us into better Christians. So there's that. So yeah, when do you get to teens? Okay, so someone asked the question about spanking and teenagers. I don't spank my teens. And I know that's probably going to cause an uproar in some people's homes, but you know what? It's my house. It's my children. And both my husband and I were raised in Christian homes, and I was spanked as a teen. And it's not saying anything against my mother, but I really, really think that when I was spanked as a teenager, it did more harm than good. And probably part of that was my fault because like I said, I'm strong-willed by nature. But I feel like, teenagers get to the point where they know your rules, and and if you have their heart, then you shouldn't be dealing with many issues when they're teenagers. I have pretty good teens. I have a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 14-year-old. I would say the only thing that they probably struggle with is their sass, because they're teenagers. And I feel like that's probably it. I don't deal with rebellious teenagers when it comes to the normal stuff that most people deal with teenagers. They're good kids, they're glad to be in church. They obey us. They listen to us. They're pretty responsible. They do their schoolwork. I don't have to get on to them about that. They get up in the morning and they know they have to get their schoolwork done. They do whatever chore I tell them, most of the time very willingly. Abby is great with the baby. I know I have it so good compared to most parents with teenagers. My teenagers are very, very good. And if you've done a good job training them when they're younger and keeping them in church and instilling godly principles into their life, they're not going to need many spankings when they're older. That's just kind of what I feel like anyways. I feel like, my teenagers don't really need to be spanked. And when I was growing up, like I said, this is based off of my experience. I felt like when I got spanked as a teenager, that it bred resentment and bitterness towards my mom. My dad died when I was 17. I think my last spanking was like 15 or 16. But I feel like when they're old enough to be driving a vehicle, they should be past the point of spankings, and a lot of you might have different feelings about that and different opinions. And that's what you're going to have to decide. I'm just telling you the truth and how I do it in my household. That's where you're going to have to decide, where's the age cutoff? Are we going to keep spanking them until they're married? If you do, that's up to you. It's your child. I'm talking about my children though. And this is how I do it with my children. I've found that a very effective thing that works is, yes, my children have, only my son has a phone because he drives, but they have a tablet, and you take that thing away. They have an Xbox. My sons have an Xbox. You take that thing away for a while and they straighten up pretty quick. So it's pretty effective in our house to take away all forms of electronics and fun things in the form of electronics, like watching a movie or something. We don't have regular TV, but electronics and video games, because my sons do play video games. Let me text my husband real quick. I need to make sure my son picks up my other son from driver's ed. All right, so let me read some of the comments here. Having their hearts. Yes, that's really the most important thing when it comes to teens. Groundings. Yeah, I would do groundings. Obviously, there's not much I can ground my children from. There's not many activities besides church activities, and I'm not going to take that from them. So like I said, with us, it is the one thing that they have, which is a tablet. Like Abby has a tablet, or she has my old phone, I think, but there's no service. It's just like for on Wi-Fi, some games and stuff. And then Chloe has a tablet. It works really well with my kids. So be open. Miss Amanda said, thank you for sharing this, because my husband and I've had many conversations about spankings as teens and have been on the fence. And like I said, everyone has different experiences and everyone has different opinions. Okay. The Andersons might have a totally different opinion than me. The Jimenezes might, but this is just what works for me in my house. And I think a lot of it is just how I was raised. And coming off of my experiences being raised in a Christian home, a lot of you are starting off into this journey and you weren't raised that way. So you don't know. So it's just going to be one thing you're going to have to pray about. And every child's different. I mean, maybe one child needs to be spanked when they're 14, 15. Maybe another child doesn't give you an ounce of trouble. Every child is different. And that's the thing when it comes to training children, you're going to have to adapt the way you train to different children. What works for one child might not work for another. And it's not like, every child is a cookie cutter child that's exactly the same and has the same temperament. And with one of my children, I just have to snap my fingers at her and tell her, I am so disappointed in you. You better knock it off. And that's all it takes. But then with the other child who's a lot more strong-willed, it might take 2 spankings. Okay. So saying it's different for every child. Jen asked, how often do they play on electronics? Daily. It's usually daily. Once I don't like them to do it before school. They know that, school and chores need to get done. But then even me, I like to have some time. I like to have some time to chill and downtime. And that's, and be on my phone a little bit. So for the kids, yes, it's daily. So I try to keep an eye on how long they've been doing it, limit their time. So, Maudie said, my teens are as big as I am, so I can't imagine spanking them. And my son's taller than me, which, some people have. They've spanked their son taller than them. My mother-in-law is only 4'11". So, my husband was probably taller than her and still getting spanked. I don't even know when his last spanking was, but and she's this tiny, tiny little woman. So I kind of chuckle when I think of her trying to spank him. But I think when he was growing up, he said the harder spankings came from her because she wanted to make sure, since she was so tiny, she wanted to make sure that they hurt. Whereas his dad was kind of a bigger man. And so he wanted to make sure he didn't hurt him too much. So it's like his dad gave it to him lighter, but his mom overcompensated. So, but like I said, this is just throwing out my opinion. You do what the Lord lays upon your heart. You have to pray about it. It's your home. Okay. This is just my opinion. That I found that the main thing with teenagers, is you really need to have a relationship with them. So many parents think that they can just be these dictators at home and barking out commands, and they don't even focus on figuring out who their children are, what their interests are, having a relationship with them, taking the time to talk to them. And they lose their children a lot that way, because they are just like the dictator type. And so I really try to make it a point with my older teens, maybe to take them one-on-one just somewhere throughout the week. This is good with the little ones too. And I try to talk to them, when we're out. I think boys too, when it comes to their mom, I have a 17 and 16-year-old, and sometimes I feel like I'm living with 3 men and it's hard once they get to, my oldest son will be graduating high school in a couple months, and he's close to being a man. And I think he's at a hard stage because he still has to submit to his mom, but yet he's almost a man. And I think that's more difficult for teen boys when they get to that age when it comes to their mom. And don't get me wrong, we have, like I said, he can be a little sassy sometimes, but we have a good relationship. And I can tell he loves me a lot. And he'll sometimes bring home a piece of cheesecake for me or something, or my favorite ice cream. And he'll do sweet little things like that, which just makes my heart because I know that he loves me and he's really trying. And you can see it in your sons as they get older. They are really trying, but it is hard for them because they're learning that they still have to submit to mom, but yet they're getting ready to be a man. And it's men don't like submitting to women. That's just their nature. So when you got these teen boys that are almost men, it's kind of hard for them. So I still have to remind him many times, don't you dare sass me. I'm your mother. I'm your mother. You don't sass me. I'm still in charge. Okay. So I have to remind him of that sometime. So encourage them, especially your boys. What does every husband love? He loves compliments and encouragement from his wife. And the same things works with teen boys. They love being complimented by their mom. They love being encouraged by their mom, and that's just something that men like having. So, okay. So they are your number one priority. Your teenagers and your family, your kids, they're your number one priority. Encourage them, love them. If you do things right when they're younger, you'll have their hearts when they're older. And having their hearts is really, really the key thing, I believe, when it comes to teenagers. Even still today, my husband and I, the way we were raised, there's some things. We are 38 years old, okay? So we are 2 years away from being 40. That's crazy to me. And 40 when I was younger seemed so old. Now it seems so young. But we're 2 years away from being 40, and there's still things that we will not do because we know it would hurt our parents. My husband will never walk into a bar and take a drink of alcohol because he knows what it would do to his dad and his mom. I've never drank a drop of alcohol. I've never smoked. I've never had a tattoo. And I would never do any of those things because I know it would bother my mom. And I'm still trying to bring honor to my mom. I believe honor thy parents, honor thy father and mother goes your whole life as long as they're alive, even after they're dead, because you're carrying their name. My husband is Tommy McMurtry II. He carries his dad's name, and then my son carries his name. So even after they're dead, I am Dan Cutler's daughter. And even though my dad is dead, I'm still known in a lot of family circles as Dan Cutler's daughter. So I want to bring honor to my dad's name, to the Cutler name. So there's things that we will not do. And so that's just part of, having your child's heart and instilling those things in them when they're young. It's so important when they're young. Now, I've had this conversation with other people, maybe that were saved later in life. They have children and they did not do it right when they were young. And now they're like middle school, teenage, and they're kind of at an impasse because they're like, do I spank them? I never spanked them. And that's a really tough one for me because, you get saved, you've never been in church before, you start coming to church and your life starts changing. And then all of a sudden you're spanking your 8-year-old when you never did before. Or you're spanking your 10-year-old, you're giving your 10-year-old a spanking when you never have before. And especially if you have not instilled those godly principles into their heart from the time they were young, it's going to be a tough battle. So I would just really, really pray about that. And, if they're like 5 and under, when you get saved, yes, go for it. Definitely start incorporating those things into your life and into their life. But the older they get, the harder it's going to get. It's harder I can't even talk. The older they get, the harder it's going to get to, instill these things in their life, especially if they're an older teenager. When you start coming to church, when they're an older teenager, you don't want them to become bitter towards the things of God if they're not saved. And so you have to be really, really careful with that. So that's just something you're going to have to take into consideration when you're thinking about it. So Let me see. Don't wait till they're 15 to spank, obviously. Do it when they're younger. And then, as always, balance is the key. Okay, you can be too harsh, but you can be too lenient too. So it's just finding that balance. I'm still trying to find the balance. I've almost raised one to adulthood, and I'm still trying to find a balance. Like I said, I was too hard on my younger kids. I might be too easy on my younger kids sometimes. I don't know. My older ones would say that. You're too hard on them. But you have to be careful. You want well-behaved kids who will not bring you shame, but you don't want robots who are afraid to death that you're going to explode on them. I cringe when I see some of these parents with their children. They're just so martial and, Gestapo about it. And their children are so scared of them. Do you really want children who are afraid of you, who are afraid when you come into the room? I mean, obviously there's a godly fear, but apologizing is important. That is. Yes, it is. Your kids need to hear that. So, mistake that parents make. I'm going to go over this real quick because I can hear my baby crying in the background. Here, Abby, this is like her fussy time of day. I'm going to have a couple things. It's, mistakes parents make. You have opposite ends of the spectrum. Okay, so being too harsh when they're too young. You don't want to be too harsh. You don't want to be beating them with these thick implements. You want to show them grace, but then not being consistent or flip-flopping. Okay, so flip-flopping. I mean, one day this is off limits, and then the next week it's fine. Your kids are going to be so confused. They're going to be like, what's going on? They're not going to know their boundaries. They're not going to know the rules. So set the rules and keep them that way. Being a Nazi dictator. Okay, and like Gestapo about things. But then on the flip side, it's trying to be a best friend with a child and not disciplining them at all. That's not going to work either. It's somewhere right in the middle. It's having a balance of having your children's hearts and having a relationship, but yet disciplining when they need it to. Okay. Being ridiculous with expectations, expecting them to act like a 20-year-old in a 2-year-old body. Obviously, that's not going to work. But versus not having any expectations. Okay, anything goes. Throw a temper tantrum, fine. I'll just, walk around you. You can scream all you want. Just whatever goes. Chaos, blah, blah, blah. Tell your children what behavior is acceptable and what's not. Let them know. Kids need to know. They're going to be confused. They're not going to have any, what is it? They're not going to have any peace in their little hearts if they don't know what's going on. Okay, so you have to, from the time they're little, this is off limits. This is okay. Really set those boundaries and let them know. Or there's parents that think their children are perfect. Not many, but some think their children are perfect and they can do no wrong. Okay, that's a mistake that often parents make, is that they think their child, my child will never do that. The one time I said my child would not do that, it turned out he had done that. So that was when Tommy was like, how old was he? Was he like 6 or 7, maybe? 6 or 7. Oh my goodness. It was such a humbling experience as a parent. Now, you want me to share one of my humbling experiences as a parent? Okay, well, here we go. So, one of my friends came in the church. We were at the church for some function. It was like, I don't know, Sportsman's Day. Yeah, I think it was Sportsman's Day, because that's why he would have had the bow and arrow. So I think it was a Sportsman's Day, and one of my friends comes in and she's like, one of the church windows just got shot out by a bow and arrow. And I said, what? I was assistant pastor's wife at the time. So the things of the church kind of, pertain to me. And she's like, yeah. And I was asking the kids about it, and they said Tommy was back there with a bow and arrow. And I said, Tommy, no, my kid wouldn't do that. Why did I say that? Don't ever say that. Turns out, yes, Tommy had indeed shot out the window in the church. And it was one of those super long windows that has the thing that you screw out, like it like flips out and then it flips back. And it was super, super long. So it was a custom window. Yeah, don't ever say that as a parent. You'll live to regret it. I've never said that since. I believe my children can do anything now because of that. And so we had to go get Tommy. At the time, each of our children had a savings account. And they knew like since the time our kids are young, they like work for money. They love money. They love having dollar bills. They love having cash money. And so he knew the value of money a little bit. And we took the money out of his bank account at like 6 or 7. And we said, you're paying for this. We're not paying for this. You're paying for this. And he still remembers that. So yeah, it was like $150 for that stupid window. And one of the most humbling experiences as a parent. Oh, so yeah, he was in the back playing with his friends, and he was like, hey, look at this. And he pulled back his string, let the arrow fly, and it hit the window. I'm just glad it was a window and not someone's eye or someone's head. So that's good. That's good. It was just a window. Yeah, our kids definitely know how to humble us. Miriam asked, do you allow your teens to use Instagram or Facebook? I do not. I do not allow social media. That is one of the things in our home that I draw the line at. My 2 girls have Pinterest, but even that, I told them I can go in your tablets at any time and look at what you've been looking at, what you've been pinning. Most of Pinterest is pretty innocent. I haven't seen too much on there. I mean, obviously everything has something bad on it if they look for it, but that just shows their nature too if they're looking for it. So, but no, my boys do not have Instagram, Facebook. My son has a YouTube account that he does videos on sometimes, and that's about the extent of it. I don't really want them to be on social media until they're out of my house. Maybe when my oldest turns 18, I'll reconsider that. I don't know. That's just something in our house right now. I just recently got Facebook not even a year ago, so I'm late to the whole social media bandwagon as it is. And that's just one thing. I think you're putting too much onto a teenager with those social media accounts because teens really can't handle that. They get addicted to like the likes and the shares, and I've heard of cyberbullying, and there's a lot of idiots on these social media accounts. And I really don't want to subject my children to that. They're already in a phase where it's a tricky phase of life, being a teenager is. And I don't really want to put that pressure of that stuff on them. I don't think that they're mature enough to handle it. So no, mine do not. Like I said, my oldest has a phone primarily because he drives. My 16-year-old does not even have a phone. My 14-year-old has my old phone, but it has no service. Like I said, it's just pretty much for like apps and stuff that she can do only on Wi-Fi. So yeah, no unfettered access to the internet. I turn my internet off at night so that they cannot stay up or be on their phones or look at their phones or anything like that. A lot of times I take their phones. I used to do this all the time. I probably should get back to it. With no internet, they can't look at anything anyways, because my son doesn't have data on his phone. He can only look at different apps on Wi-Fi. So when I turn the Wi-Fi off, there's no access at all. So that is one rule too that I do in my home. So just realize that your child has a sin nature like you do. Okay. We are all human and we're all rotten to the core. We're not in our glorified bodies yet. And I struggle every day. You struggle every day. We mess up, we fall down, and your kids are going to fall down a lot. Okay. I am in such a better place in my 30s than I was as a teenager, or as even in my 20s, I felt like I was still growing up. So just show some grace to your children. That is that's the biggest thing, is that you need to remember that God shows us grace each and every day. We are sinners. We still mess up, and your children are going to mess up too, and you need to show them grace. I feel like a lot of parents have a lack of grace in their child upbringing, and it's really going to turn around and bite them one of these days when their child becomes bitter and leaves. And like I said, every child has to make that choice for himself. So every parent makes mistakes and messes up. There's no perfect parent. Your child still has to decide if they're going to follow Christ when they turn 18 or whatever. And if they decide to walk away from it, you can't blame yourself. You can't sit there and think of every single mistake you ever made because we all make mistakes. Your child still has to make that choice for themselves. You can't choose for them. They have to decide to follow Christ and follow the Lord. The only thing you could do is try to follow biblical principles, try to listen to people that have raised children, people that have been through the toddler years and the middle school years and the teenage years. And I feel like I'm not even totally qualified to speak on this because my son is 17 and he will be 18 next January. So I've almost raised an adult, and I'm really super happy with how he's turned out so far. He's turning, all three of my teenagers are turning out great. I love it, but they're not there yet. They still have to make that choice when they're out on their own. So I guess I'll see if, they make that choice when they get to that age. I don't know. It's like I said, it still has to be their choice. So, let me see real quick. About wrap it up. Yeah, Miriam said I won't be allowing my sons to use social media to their adults. Yeah, and she said she has a 12-year-old stepdaughter that was using Instagram without permission and following inappropriate content. Yeah. My kids know if I ever find out they're sneaking around, I mean, it's gone forever. Everything gets taken away. No more tablet, no more phone with a little apps on it. It's gone. It's gone. So if they ever listen to this, which I tell them this all the time, they're like, I know, Mom. I know, Mom. I know, Mom. So it's gone. Keep an eye on that, snoop around. If you have a teenager that has a phone, get on there without telling them. Make sure that I know my password. I know the password to my son's computer. I get on there all the time. His tabs are open all the time. I can see exactly. He has it down. He manually uses it for church stuff, and I use it for church stuff too. So I can get on there and see everything. Don't tell them you're going to look, and just go in there and look. Keep an eye on that. You're the parent. You hold the keys to all of their privileges. I tell them that on a daily basis. I hold the keys. So, testy toddlers. Is she sleeping? Is she awake? Yeah, she's being fussy. My baby's being fussy. So I'm probably going to have to wrap it up. One more question. If a child chooses to not follow Christ, how should the relationship be between their Christian parents and the child? Should parents just continue to witness? Yes, I would. I would not. I would let the I've had people email me this question, the same question. I would try to keep that relationship definitely. If they are doing something in their life that you do not approve of, let's say they are into alcohol, if they will have alcohol out at all, I would not go over there with your other children because they will be an influence on your other children. I will tell them you can come to my house and I want to visit with you, but definitely do not let them be an influence on your other children. Don't do anything with them that you don't agree with. That's what I would do. So, do you use the same app Mrs. Anderson uses that sends everything her son does to her phone? I don't, but I need to look in. I keep saying I'm going to look into that app. That is a really good app to have. It shows every single text. And I guess really basically one of the only people he texts is Isaac Anderson. And I know she's going to see every text. So that's one of the reasons I'm not really worried about it in that aspect. And I'll even get on there sometimes. He leaves his phone laying around all the time. So I'll get on there randomly without him even knowing. I don't even tell him. And I'll read his text or I'll look to see who he's been texting. So if he suddenly became very secretive about his phone and was like hiding his phone from me, then I would probably think something was up. But he leaves his phone around everywhere. And so I'm always picking it up and looking at it. So, and Hope asked, I'm curious, what do you think about your children and what friends you allow them to have if some out of church? I've never really ran into that. My son does have a job now, but because he's homeschooled, he can work in the morning and early afternoon. So he works mainly with adults. So he doesn't really have any friends outside of church or outside of other Baptist churches. Those are pretty much the only places that his friends are. Would I let him hang out and have unsaved friends? No, I wouldn't. That's I've seen way too many bad influences when it comes to that with children. A bad will influence good before good influences bad. So I keep that in mind. So no, only saved friends. yeah, just stay consistent. And my 14-year-old daughter is rocking my baby and looking at me like, Mom, come on, let's go. She's very fussy. So I need to wrap it up. But hopefully that helped. I think I got through most of my notes. I know there's like 50 trillion more things we can cover. And I was trying to talk really, really fast. And sorry for my voice and all the stiffing and everything. Hopefully by next week I'll be completely back to normal. So, nice stream. Interesting take on raising children in a modern society. You are a parenting expert. I don't know about that. I don't think I'm an expert by any means, but I was raised in a Christian home, and I'm trying to raise my children. I'm not trying to, I am raising my children in a Christian home. So I've learned a couple of things along the way, being raised the way I was. And my husband was raised in a Christian home, and him and all of his siblings are serving the Lord. And they're all in church, and they're all raising their kids in church. And his parents did a really good job raising them. And that is a testament to the way that they brought him up. So I'm very happy that he was raised the way he was. So I did cover that at the beginning, what age of spanking should start. I would say when they know the difference between yes and no, and they are trying to defy you, which is not usually to about 1.5 to 2. Is when about that. Do not spank babies, but I already said that. So anyways, thanks for the prayers, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.